50 seconds and counting. We are go for Apollo 7 at this time. T-minus 50 seconds. The vehicle now pressurized, and the vehicle is go, as is the
Our next guest is a civilian intelligence analyst and a psychotherapist in New York City. He received a degree in psychology from Fordham University. He's an expert in Chinese language, history, martial arts, and is an FAA licensed pilot and instrument ground instructor with 23 years of flying experience. He has studied the paranormal and UFOs for over 40 years and has published many research articles on the web exposing government cover-ups and deception in the JFK assassination. He has also written extensively to expose NASA's use of what he calls disinformation technology in suppressing evidence of extraterrestrial life and exposing the real nature and threat of the UFO phenomenon. He is currently the associate editor of UFOdigest.com, and we're going to get a chance to hear quite some interesting things here, I think, today about both photographic evidence, of course, but also presence of intelligent life that has been actively operating on and above the moon for ages. He's also going to address how a breakaway civilization requires of us a breakaway level of consciousness. You have to think that it's possible first before you can actually get somewhere. That's how all ideas are formulated, how anything in our world are created. You have to imagine it first before it can actually happen, right? So if you want to create it, we have to envision it first. So his talk is called Who is Minding the Moon? Please help me welcome Robert Morningstar.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's truly a pleasure to be here. It's a big surprise for me. I expected to have been in England, but I gave that trip up because I feel that this is more important. I'm honored by Henrik and Jeroen, and I'm certainly honored to be standing here with such an outstanding group of speakers who have some of the most important information that this nation needs to hear. I was very pleased with the website and thrilled to see my statement. The first statement, the truth is seamless. The truth is like a fabric. The truth cannot be ripped apart. The truth has no flaws, no gaps, no missing pieces. And my job has been, over the years, to reveal the truth. I call my presentation today, The Revelation of Apollo, because what I'm going to show you today is what Apollo really found. And this has been hidden from us for 44 years, 45 years. The decision to hide these facts, because what I'm going to present to you are facts. The decision to hide these facts from us was made 1 year before the first Apollo launch to the moon. I'm talking about Apollo 8. But a year before that, in 1967, a very high-level decision was made as a result of a think tank's conclusions. The think tank that was hired by NASA is called the Brookings Institution. And they produced a paper called On the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. The question that had been posed to Brookings was, what should we do if we were to encounter either intelligent life in outer space, signs of intelligent life on the moon, or signs of previous civilizations that had existed or visited the moon? The conclusion of the Brookings Institution was that the world should not be told. The Brookings Institution concluded that if the world were told, it would be too destabilizing to religion, to economics, to politics. And for those reasons, the world had to be protected from this knowledge. They cite the destabilization of religion as one of the main reasons for denying this knowledge or keeping it from us. They chose to pick on the Buddhists, of all people. They said that the Buddhists would be very upset and that their religion would be destabilized if it were to be revealed that extraterrestrials exist. Now, folks, I like to say, I'm a nudist, not a Buddhist. I'm a Taoist, not a Maoist. And I'm an eagle, not a beagle. Okay? And when I see something that's patently false, I have to speak against it. Now, the idea that Buddhism would be destabilized by the revelation of an extraterrestrial presence is fatuous. Buddhism has so many gods, so many spirits, so many demons, so many wrathful deities, so many benevolent deities, if you're talking about the beneficent deities of Tibet. You understand instantly that Buddhism would be very receptive to the revelation of an extraterrestrial existence or an extraterrestrial presence. In fact, the Japanese, who are entrenched in Shinto Buddhism, have the longest historical record, official historical record, other than China's, of interaction with UFOs, extraterrestrials, and more importantly, the intervention of extraterrestrials in Japanese historical affairs. I recommend a book called The Chinese Roswell. Wig Herzog. This man was able to, his specialty is Asian UFOs. And he was able to journey into China to the region of the White Pyramid, which is forbidden to most foreigners. He has a very extensive account of the Japanese history with UFOs, going back to the 1700s. I would like to jump. This is going to be a time travel. We're going to be jumping time jumps, it's called. From that time, the 1700s, to modern times, there is a field of science and a field of science fiction. And in the realm of science fiction, one of the most memorable films of my childhood was a movie called The Mysterians. And The Mysterians was a 1957 Japanese science fiction story about a group of extraterrestrials that inhabited the far side of the moon and were coming down here to the Earth to abduct women and take them away to the moon. It's a wonderful movie, enthralling, which leads me to my next statement, which is, I learned from a Tai Chi master named T.T. Liang this adage, an axiom. To think is to create, imagination becomes reality. And today I'm going to present you both imagination and the reality that followed. I want, first of all, I'm going to point out my Facebook page because this is a place where you can find all this information. I feel the best way to protect oneself and the information is to put it out there. But I'd like to point out two things. One is this avatar for me, and this photo, which has been the icon of my page for as long as I've had it, actually. That photo was taken by Apollo 10. And we're going to go looking for that thing around the moon. That thing, I call it the Sentinel. And I call it the Sentinel after the book by Arthur C. Clarke, which came out in 1948. The Sentinel became the basis of 2001: A Space Odyssey. And in 2001: A Space Odyssey, if you'll recall, it speaks about a monolith that is found on the moon and points us to another place. What the movie does not explain is that the monolith was a teaching machine. It was an extraterrestrial artifact that was, well, there's a theory called the Newman probes. The idea was posited by a physicist named Newman. He said that a very advanced extraterrestrial civilization very far away might explore the universe by sending out probes and landers that would be sleepers. They would be dormant until they were triggered by something, in which time they would awaken and start to act. And his thesis was that a sufficiently advanced civilization could plant these probes in different solar systems, awaiting for the local denizens to get smart enough to find them and figure them out. But if they were found, they would be triggered, and then they would start to reproduce themselves. That basically, if a Newman probe landed on the moon, and let's say the extraterrestrial civilization decided that we're too dumb to know, but if we got smart enough to put out a radio beam or start talking to each other on radio, that the radio beacon might reach the moon and trip the object, the Newman probe, and then unfold it and produce a factory or another robotic entity, which might be a good description of the Greys, and that these would then start to act in the local solar system. Okay? So going to the subject of to think is to create and imagination becomes reality, I would like to begin by honoring the people that took us to the moon. Our moon project did not begin in the 1950s. Our moon project began with imagination in 1936, 37, 38. So I would like to introduce you to the people who got us to the moon on the premise of imagination. These are the people that I believe planted the seed of the idea that our destiny was not to be jailed on this planet, and that man's destiny is to branch out and to continue to expand. All right, these are some of my childhood years. I want you to look at that moonscape, which I thought was pretty wild when I was a kid. But as I've grown older, I realize that these people did incredible sets that are amazingly accurate. And we come to the man who inspired us to go to the moon, and the man who inspired President Kennedy to believe that we could go to the moon. These are the people, the heroes and the villains of the Flash Gordon serial. These people, their nobility, their honesty, their heroism lives on in all of us who grew up with it. This list of actors, the producers, the Imagineers, if I may coin a word. And unfortunately, we don't have the sound, but it's a very inspiring piece of music by Franz Liszt. And I'm going to stop it right here. And I leave that. Okay, this is it's a really very interesting piece of film because it's got a lot of earthquakes and things that are coming down to Earth and affecting everyone on Earth. And no one knows what the problem is, the purple death from outer space. It involves chemtrails. The evil Emperor Ming is seeding the atmosphere. Dr. Zarkov finds out the seeds that they're putting in the atmosphere is a plague that is killing people, and they just drop dead in the street, leaving a purple mark on the forehead, and so the name, the purple death from outer space. All right, so I would like to go to the moon with you, And the first thing I'm going to talk about, again, those were the Imagineers that got us to the moon, but then there are the technicians, the scientists, and the astronauts who actually went to the moon. Yes, we went to the moon. Yes, many of the NASA photos, many of the NASA films are doctored, but they're not doctored because we didn't go to the moon. They're doctored because the Brookings Institution said, don't tell the people what you found. Fortunately, many of these, the volume of photographs and films that were taken is so great that it's actually impossible for human beings to expunge the truth because the truth is seamless. And there is a very special group of individuals at NASA who are true Americans who roil at the thought of being manipulated and coerced and forced to falsify the facts. And many of these people leak information. I take my hat off to Ken Johnson, Tom Van Flandern, former engineers, and a lot of unnamed individuals who, as good Americans and constitutional Americans, felt it's criminal to hide the facts from the public, and they have leaked this information. There are other individuals who didn't leak it but found it, and I'm a person who has delved into this very deeply. I actually honor and respect a very good friend of mine. His name is Edgar Mitchell, and I'd like to show you. Edgar Mitchell is the only astronaut who speaks forthrightly about most of what he experienced on the moon. They have to be like diplomats, and they are. And they say that the word NASA stands for never a straight answer. Unfortunately, a lot of the astronauts practice that except in private. But Edgar Mitchell, I had this privilege of meeting him at the Explorer Club in 2007 in New York City. And I asked him a question. I asked him to describe for me the internal structure of the crater Eucurt. The crater Eucurt sits in the very center of the moon, not far from where Apollo 14 landed. And by my calculation of the flight path of the LEM and how it approached and how it landed, I was certain that he had to have seen the crater Eucurt. Now, why am I interested in the crater Eucurt? Back in the 1990s, the crater Eucurt's photographs, they were very rare until very recently. It seemed that they were being hidden. And it took me years to compile and compose patches of it, patchworks, to get it together. But when I asked Edgar Mitchell to describe for me the internal structure of the crater Eucurt, he changed from an affable and very friendly professor to a military officer. In an instant, he clicked his heels, he stared at me, and he said, "No!" And I sat quaked in my seat. I said, "Wow." And then 200 people, it was an audience like this, 200 people said, "Well, what did he say? What did he do?" And then he caught it, and he said, "Well, the mission profile didn't call for me to do that, so I don't have to." Okay, I took it. I said, well, what's special about the crater Eucurt is this. There is a catalog of something that NASA has called transient lunar phenomenon. Transient lunar phenomena, TLPs. Transient lunar phenomena is their word for UFOs crossing the moon, clouds of gas that are seen to migrate across the moon, domes that appear for days and migrate across the moon, domes that appear for days and that are not there anymore. So that's a TLP. They also have a very special jargon. When we're here, they're called TLPs. When the astronauts went to the moon, they're called moon pigeons. Okay? And I'm going to show you a couple of moon pigeons today. All right. Oh, before the moon pigeons, here's where I want to go with this. I want to show you what Edgar Mitchell was able to do. And it's going to be very interesting, so it'll be worth the wait, folks, if you'll be patient with me. All right. Edgar Mitchell. I read the NASA mission reports. Edgar Mitchell was assigned a task of going to a spot in Fra Mauro, that's where they landed. And Edgar Mitchell was supposed to stand on a spot and start to take pictures for a 360-degree panorama with a 70-millimeter Hasselblad. Click, 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 and so on. So I'm studying the photographs, and first of all, they give you thumbnails. They're really small. I have very good eyes. And I look at these, and then sometimes it's just intuition. But I knew the mission. I knew the mission profile, as he called it, was to take this panorama. And as I'm going from photo to photo to photo to photo, I found that Edgar had taken 2 pictures of the same rock. And the second picture was much closer to the rock than the first picture. First of all, there should not have been a second picture. And the fact that the rock was bigger meant to me that went click, and then he went click. Okay? This is a sample. It disappeared. This is a sample. Oh, I get it. Here it is. It's the problem. So what is, okay, here's this little thumbnail here. Okay? That was what he was supposed to do. And then the rock, these are the 2 rock pictures that he took. And as a result, what he captured in the second picture is this object. And this object is a rather anomalous object that has very strange characteristics, has a strange shape. It's not the first time that I've seen it. It's not, it's a rather unusual object of undeterminable dimensions. This is a picture of what I have labeled the moon racer. And this actually comes from a photo, Apollo 15, magazine 83, photo 11 to 18. Magazine 83 was missing for 40 years. And a YouTube investigator, who gives his name as Luna Cognita, the known moon, found it about 2 years ago, and he found these missing pictures. What's unique about these photos is they weren't taken from the surface. There was an EVA, it's called a standing EVA, which I did not know about until this gentleman brought it to my attention, where the astronaut would climb up to the top of the LEM, throw open a hatch like a tank, to familiarize you. The hatch goes up, the tanker goes up, shoulders out, and they did this type of picture. But the magazine was missing for 40 years, and now we know why. Because this object appears in 2 of the photographs. That's an enhancement to bring it up, because the photo is very, very dark, and some of the things I do is to bring up detail. For example, in the original, it's almost all black. You can see this very strange configuration. Now you see the surface of the moon. You see contours here. You see these odd things up in the sky. Kind of looks like clouds. Remember TLPs? Transient lunar phenomena. Some of them have been black clouds that moved across. Regarding the crater Euclid, the reason I asked Edgar Mitchell about the crater Euclid is that since 1953, periodically, a bright red ruby light has been seen by astronomers to emanate from the crater Euclid. Now, the crater Euclid is a circular crater with an almost perfect equilateral triangle. I'm sure that if you've explored the internet and lunar anomalies, you've seen a photograph of a crater that has a 6-pointed star inside it. When the sunlight, high sun, hits the crater Euclid, the rays break off the central triangle, and they cast points of light on the rim, creating this six-pointed star. The other part is when that six-pointed star is not being shown, is that the crater Eucurt looks like the model for the eye in the pyramid. You compare crater Eucurt to the dollar bill, and you'll see the similarity of the Great Seal, the eye in the pyramid, but you'll also see our stars, the 13 stars arranged in a six-pointed star. So that was my interest in crater Eucurt. This is the other picture of what I call the moon racer. This is a photo taken by the Apollo rover. And this is Apollo 16. And as he was going by, this film is running, and I'm watching it. And this is 1/24th of a second. And I saw this appear and disappear. I captured the frame, and then I shot this off a 42-inch monitor so that it's backlit. In the backlighting, more detail comes out. And here we come to I have a problem with NASA photographs of the moon. If you study where the Apollo missions landed, you will see that the terrain is really amazing. It rises. For example, Apollo 17 landed in the Taurus-Littrow Valley between the two massive mountains. One is called North Massif and the other one is called the South Massif. Now when you look at it, I have a 3D photo of it, the altitude of these mountains are immense. And yet when they land and take pictures of the surface, what you have is the Sahara, what I call the Sahara on the moon. Many of the photographs that NASA released in the 80s, 90s, into 2000, one of the things about it that really bother me is that there's no stars. The sky is black. Now, I've taken these photographs and enhanced them to bring them up as I did this one. You increase something called the gamma, which used to be called gain. Gamma, brightness, sharpness, and contrast. Those are the three functions I do. I do no photoshopping. I just illuminate what's in the dark. And as time went by, I would find these photographs, illuminate them, and the sky turned into magic marker. Things blocked out, and really sometimes very, very crude, very crudely done. So I've gotten into the habit, whenever I see that something is really black, I go into it and I bring it out, and you would be amazed at some of the details that comes out. Now, Apollo 16 landed near this crater called Descartes. It's a crater, high rim, jagged edges, but it looks like the Sahara. And yet, when he got into the rover, John Young took off like a bat out of hell, and I was standing in front of a 42-inch monitor, and he rock and rolled across the plains, and he was going someplace really fast for some reason. And I think it was to look for where this thing was coming from. Now, when I found this, I thought that this was something passing on the other side of the moon. I found another one about a minute later that looked like a meteor. And I said, there's no atmosphere on the moon. How there can be a meteor? A meteor goes incandescent because of the friction with the atmosphere. So I was really curious about these photos, but I worked on this one, and I'd like to show you something. I believe it's the next photo, so we should be able to. All right, there's the moon racer. Let me enlarge this a bit, and I'll show you what Buzz Aldrin was talking about. This craft appears in the film that I was trying to show you, Apollo 16 onboard camera. The remarkable thing about this scene is it's only 6 seconds long, but my eyes are very sharp, and I saw something coming across the moon that looked to me like Wonder Woman's airplane. Remember Wonder Woman flew an airplane that was transparent, what we would call stealth? Well, I picked up a form racing across the moon. It lasts 6 seconds, and then chop. But before the chop, 3 frames were left intact. The 3 frames show this craft crossing the horizon, Beyond the horizon, the next one up, 3 lights, space stations light up. And this is a time capsule, friends. This is a message from the past. I talked about those NASA technicians who roil at the thought of having to hide the facts. And they're told, destroy this, cut this out, chop that film. Well, whoever was told to do that with this film did his job, but he did it very subtly, and he signed it. And the signature is this gash of a splice mark. Any of you who have worked with 8mm, 16mm, 24mm film, you know you have individual frames. And if you're going to edit something, to do it cleanly, you cut between the frames along the black line, and you just see a jump in the film. Well, this particular film shows the 3 frames that I'm referring to. The moon racer on the horizon with that wing down in the, over the moon. This one which is clear, the third one in which the lights light up. But the editor, when he chopped the film, he did not cut right across the bottom of the frame. What he did is he left 1/5 of the frame, the ensuing frame, he carved it out, and I took that to be a signature. That's what actually caught my eye. I could see, first of all, I saw this, but then I saw the jump. So when I froze that frame, it showed, it's like, you know, you can take an X-Acto blade and go perfectly straight. He went, and he scraped it, and then he joined it. And this is a time capsule. Somebody in NASA saw this thing and was told to remove many more feet of this thing traveling up into space after the space stations light up. And his sense of righteousness did not permit him to go all the way. They told him to cut the film, get this thing out of there, put it out of sight, but he left 3 little frames for someone in the future to stumble upon it and recognize what was there. Remember what Buzz Aldrin said, and it was quoted by Michael this morning, that their ships were far bigger than ours, faster than ours, and after they saw them, there was no question at all of a moon base or a space station. Why? Because somebody is already there, and somebody has been already there for a very, very long time. So let me continue with this slide presentation, now that we have a handle on it, and I hope the handle stays on. All right, this is the moon racer crossing the horizon. It's a very subtle picture, but in here, you can see this white is white on white, and if you have a really good eye, you see that this is that edge of the wing, the body of the craft. I look at it and I said, boy, they must have given this to Spielberg and George Lucas for Star Wars as a model for X-wing fighters or even the Millennium Falcon. Let me just flip these 2 back and forth for you for a moment, and you'll see, you get a sense of what I'm talking about. All right? All right, now we'll continue. We'll see. Okay, this is what I was looking for. This is the same picture I showed you a few seconds ago. This beam of light rising. Now, as I said, I thought asteroid moving by really fast or meteor, quote unquote. And I thought, or it's beyond the moon. Because, folks, one of the scariest things that I've ever seen in my life was the Perseid meteor showers that happened around 1998. I went out and I drove out of the city to be able to see this, and I saw a meteor go like that. And when I saw that, I thought of the impact. The velocity is, the right term is, the velocity was astronomical. And I thought, oh my God, if that should hit the Earth, the impact would be incredible. Now, that's what I thought I was seeing, because I saw the Perseid go by the Earth. It just hit some of the atmosphere, lit up, and then went by. This is the real terrain. This is the rim of a crater, this black, the back of a dragon. You see, it looks to me like a dragon tail. And this is what emerged when I enhanced the photograph. And so the moon is not like the Sahara. And NASA does hide terrain that looks unusual, and as you will see a little later, structures that I have found. And I will present them to you. What I will present to you today is a constellation of space stations that the Apollo astronauts encountered when they went on the far side of the moon, because it's not dark. And the description that I give, as having seen these things, I say to myself, oh my God, you know, the Apollo astronauts, when they went around the other side of the moon, you know, two guys in the LEM, the other guy alone in the command module, it would be like this. Two people in a kayak leave Pearl Harbor and go around Oahu, and they come around the other side of Oahu, and as they make a turn around the island, all of a sudden, the USS Ronald Reagan supercarrier is racing by them. That's the magnitude of the size of the spacecraft and the space stations that I will show you in a little while. I'll continue with this slide set, and all right, this is a photo, also leaked to the public, of I can do it this way. Okay, now this should look a little familiar, this shape. You see the shape here? This is an Apollo 11 photograph. The other was an Apollo 16 photograph that I showed you, the moon racer. And the previous one was an Apollo 15 photograph. Now, you'll see, it's not exactly alike, but the construction, if you'll recall, the moon racer has a wing, it's kind of like an outrigger canoe. That's a good image, an outrigger canoe. They have the wing out here, a central body, and a very strangely shaped and configured other wing. It's not symmetrical. This is the Apollo 11 shot, the moon racer. The blue close-up was Apollo 16, and the very first ones where I said Apollo 15, the lost magazine, was recovered by Luna Cognita, whoever he may be. Thank you very much. There it is again. That is the moon racer, the enhancement, close-up. This is a cropped photo. Now, this is interesting because this is 219. 218 showed you the craft low and in the dark, and so I had to bring it up to show the terrain. This one is different. This one, the moon racer, is climbing out. You're seeing it from a different place. In the other photo, you saw it from the top, like this. In this photo, you're seeing it like this. So what does that say? That says this thing came in like this and swooped up. And that's exactly what it looks like in the Apollo 16 film that I may be able to show you a bit later. So moon racer was, well, you know, when we have intruders along the coast, we used to send out fighters to intercept them and check them out and see what their business was with us. Well, I think that this is the purpose of this craft. They came, they saw the Apollo lander, and they decided to give us a message. And they repeated the message with every flight, which is why there was no Apollo 20, Apollo 19, and the mission stopped at 17. By Apollo 17, we got the message, terminated it. The excuse was funding, but I don't think it was funding myself. Now let me go on. Hiroshima on the moon is an area that was mapped by the Chinese. The Chinese satellite, the second probe, Chang'e 2, went to the moon, and in going to the moon, it took a picture. It actually took quite a lot of pictures of an area that is an area of vast devastation. It's an area of vast devastation laid waste. And what I recognized, I call it Hiroshima on the Moon because when I was a young sea cadet, I was taken into a room by my captain, Captain Peter Luthi. I'm talking about 1958. And in 1958, he took me into a room, and in that room, he projected slides of Hiroshima that he had taken 1 month after the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. And the atomic bombing of Hiroshima was captured in 35 millimeter slides that, to my knowledge, the world has not yet seen. I was absolutely stunned to find a video of this area. So what I'm going to do is going to take you through the terrain, and if I succeed, I'll be able to show you the original video taken by Chang-O 2. Now, who is Chang-O, and who is Chang-O, and who is U2? On the way to the moon, I learned about Chang-O in 1969 as we were going to the moon. And the way I learned about it was that Houston sent a message to the Apollo 11 astronauts, which many people thought was facetious, and I thought not. I thought not, because the astronauts didn't take it as a joke. The message was, Apollo 11, Houston. Houston, Apollo 11, go ahead. We have a message for you. There seems to have been, there was a Chinese princess that was abducted several thousand years ago by a 6-foot-tall gray rabbit and taken to the moon. So if you see her around, let us know. That's the gist of it. And the Apollo astronauts didn't giggle, they didn't laugh, they just said, Roger. Right? Now that's who Chang-O is, and the Chinese have named their spacecraft after this princess. All right, we've got some success here. This is a little patch of this area of wide devastation. This is shadow. Now this shadow is immense. You see this little patch here? Notice also all of these white spots. These are all columns. Columns of approximately the same altitude and the same diameter. And there are hundreds of them. So let's go through this area, and then I will see if we can get... all right, I had a video of a man named Carl Wolf, who was a U.S. Air Force sergeant in the 1960s, and he was stationed in Langley, Virginia, in photo reconnaissance. He was a technician. They were doing the Corona satellite, and his story was that some machine broke down, a photo reproduction machine, and he was the technician asked to fix it. He had a high top secret crypto clearance, and he was ferried over to this special hangar at Langley Air Force Base, Langley, Virginia, and told to fix the machine. Now this printer was a giant thing. He said it was about the size of a refrigerator, and when he checked it out, it couldn't be fixed there. So it had to be taken out and brought back. And in the process, he got to know the technician, and the technician said to him, hey, you know, we found something on the moon. And he says that he literally started to get frightened, that he knew he wasn't supposed to know this stuff. But the fellow, the technician who was telling him about it, he seemed that he was overburdened with the weight of this knowledge. And I'll tell you, the weight of solitary knowledge is a very difficult thing to bear. So you find relief in sharing the knowledge with someone. So he shared with him the knowledge that they had found a moon base and structures and buildings. And he showed him a couple of photographs. And Carl Wolf says, I saw tall towers, circular towers, all of the same size, height, and all of the same diameter. I also saw other buildings with triangular tops. So I also see a building, quite frankly, this one here, that reminds me of the CIA building at Langley, Virginia, which if you've seen aerial photographs, looks like a broken swastika, pardon the expression. So this is a triangular topped tower in this area, and I'm very pleased to tell you that I finally have found out where this thing resides. You see the triangular tops? Triangular tops? And then here, we're going to get into this area here a little bit later. Now, the remarkable thing about this video, there's what I call the swastika, triangular top. So we're going to get to know the terrain a little bit better. And you see, as we go out into a wider scale, we start to see more and more detail. Look at this down here. This is a standing wall. Right here. This standing wall is casting these long shadows. But the most interesting part of this section here for me, use my laser here, is this big E. You see this over here? I'm pretty sure that I can enlarge it now. Now, this big E over here, as I call it, reverse E, is a rather unusual thing to find. First of all, it's standing upright, right? It seems to be almost like a gateway. There's a wall, right-angled here, as if this were or had been a chamber. Likewise this. I have found a lot of square craters on the moon. Square craters, rectangular craters, square craters, and other very unusual looking structures is quite plainly what I'll call them. As we come by, we go over here, we back out a little bit. All right. Okay, this is the plane. On this side of this plane, it is just leveled and rubble is strewn all over. But to the left side, or what we would call to the west, there remains an amazing infrastructure. I would also like to point something very unusual out to you. This mist here. What I have found in this area, in the Chinese Chang'e 2 satellite video, and I'll tell you folks, it is the best, clearest, highest resolution video that I have ever seen of the moon. Now, the interesting thing about this video from the Chinese is they visited this place morning, noon, and night. This very short video shows morning sunlight striking the top of a structure. And at the top of that structure is a white cross. Okay, so in 15 minutes. Right, so there was this white cross, and the Chinese went back, and I say morning, noon, into evening. So they got morning sunlight, midday light, and evening light. However, that means that the Chinese satellite went back there repeatedly for 2 weeks, because the morning on the moon is 1 Earth week long. And so, the moon is turning, 28-day period. When part's in sunlight, it turns very slowly. So when the Chinese found this, they kept going back to look at it again and again and again. So that tipped me off that this is a very important place, very important place. This is a much better photograph than the other. And we have, again, the triangular topped buildings that Carl Wolf described. We have structures here. Now this is the most amazing structure to me, because it appears to me to be a stadium. Not just a stadium, but a stadium All right, if you can imagine where the stadium where the Giants play, the stadium, and if you can imagine the gateway to the west in St. Louis, this is inside the stadium, this is out of the stadium. Then we have this structure here, which is pretty much symmetrical. You see? These two tops go across, these two tops, sort of like an egg crate type of structure. And then we proceed to other areas of this region. I'm told I only have 15 minutes to finish up, so I'm going to go through this fast. Oh, here, look. That's a much better photo of these two structures. What I call the stadium and I call the arch. So let's go through this and just get a hang of it. Again, I'm really fascinated by the triangular topped structures, the stadium with the arch coming out of it, the, may I call it the Intercontinental Hotel? Because it reminds me of the place where Howard Hughes wound up in Nicaragua, and he left just the day before the earthquake of '72. Howard Hughes had retired recluse, and he had taken residence at the Intercontinental Hotel in Nicaragua, Managua, Nicaragua, and stayed there until the day before the earthquake. So this reminds me of that structure. So I like to label things in terms that are familiar to us. Again, I'm concentrating in that area. I'm going to go, here's this mist. Now, in the film you see, in the video, you see that this area is near a cauldron of boiling up smoke. And the smoke overrides these structures, and at other times it settles, as it has settled here. Now, that area, the black area, is an abyss. It's an area called the Mare Orientale, and it's one of the biggest structures. Again, the Big E, close up to the Big E and the standing walls. Okay. This is the object that I showed you earlier. And this object is an object that NASA says is a 1.5 foot piece of mylar. 10 minutes? 10 minutes, okay. A 1.5 foot piece of mylar. You know, I get offended when people treat me as if I'm stupid. And I'm sure you're the same. It is a great offense to be told that the obvious is not the obvious. Now let me explain to you why this cannot be a 1.5 foot piece of mylar. And the answer is in the shadow. You see? That shadow. That shadow can only be produced by two things. It's either the moon or the spacecraft. However, the sunlight is coming from the wrong direction for it to be the spacecraft. Now, there is a curve to this. Now, if you take that curve and finish off the circle, you'll find that this wedge is approximately 10 degrees of arc. 10 degrees is 1/36th of a circle. 1/36th of, you've got a calculator? 1/36th of about 6,000 miles, the circumference of the moon. So you get about 166 miles. So this object is about 166 miles in the vertical. There are 3 photographs of it. The object moves, it emerges from the sunlight, into the sunlight, it turns, and now we're getting to the nitty-gritty, which is, here, I can't tell you how I felt when I found these space stations. Because they are consistent in their shape. I was following this thing here, which I call the string of pearls. I call that the string of pearls. And in the photograph, sequentially, I was going, whoa, what is that? And now, if it's an artifact, it shouldn't appear in all the photographs. But it moves. It moves there, it moves here, and it was alone. Then we come around the bend of the moon, and all of a sudden, these objects appeared. And they caught my attention. And now, if you look at them, if you understand the size of what we're looking at, you'll understand my analogy of the kayak going around Oahu. Here's more. Okay, this is a Russian Zond photograph, early one. I work with the Russian photographs and the lunar orbiter photographs because they are hard copy prints that were brought here, and they were released, and they're not hard to tamper with. The digital information that is downloaded by NASA from the Hubble Space Telescope and the other satellites, when they're presented to the public, they are degraded. They are dehanced. I enhance photographs to bring out what's inside. NASA dehances it. But working with these, now let me show you this. This is the Mare Orientale, or Oriental Basin. And the area that we were looking at, I just found out, is in this region. Now the reason I've been interested in this region is that I found a tower there that is awesome. It's called the Ellerman Crater. And that's what got me curious about this area. I believe I can go up one more and get you to the constellation of space stations. I'm really racing. Okay, here we go. Let's see if we can get this started. All right. This is what I really came to show you. And this was one of the big shocks of my life. This I named Big Ben on the Moon. This is a tower that appears in Apollo 17, Magazine M, photograph 2366. This tower is 365 miles away from the camera. This is a close-up. It's cropped. How much? 4 minutes? Okay, let me just see if I can get to the full. Yes, ma'am. Those are the stars in the sky. And you know, years ago I kept saying, why does NASA take the stars out of the sky in the Apollo photographs? And then I said to somebody, you know why? Because the constellations that you see on the moon are the same constellations that we see from the Earth. And any anomalous light that appeared in any of these photographs, you would instantly say, what is that? And that was the reason. As I'm going to show you, if I can get through to the file that contains, let's see, okay, let's go one more. All right, that's a clear shot without the labels. I have just calculated, let me just say something about Einstein. If we're going to have a breakaway civilization and a breakaway consciousness, we have to break away from Einstein. Because there is a fundamental fallacy and a lie in Einstein's statement that we cannot go faster than the speed of light. And I've addressed this question to some of the top physicists in America. One physicist said to me, you're absolutely right. The other one said, what? No, we have never found any exceptions to Einstein's theory of relativity. And what I said to this scientist, who's very famous, but I won't embarrass him, I said to him, Professor, don't you think that it's a fallacy, fallacious thinking, and a non sequitur for Einstein to say that we cannot travel faster than the speed of light, and yet his equation says E equals mc squared? How can you posit a value of c squared when nothing can travel faster than c? They stand speechless. They stand speechless. They have no answer for that. And I'd like you to think about it. The photo of Einstein? I have no photo of Einstein to show you here today. But that's an equation that relates to this. And another time, perhaps, this is a concept of what the interior of the moon might be, because the moon has hollow spots inside. And, let me finish with this. I know my time is short. It's not what I wanted to show you completely, but this is a very beautiful photograph of San Francisco. And There's something flying over San Francisco over here, folks. And it's not a 747. And, no, it's a 1.5 foot piece of Mylar. The problem is that I have two pictures of this, and they both show this object. Oh, there it is again, look. So this was the surprise. I was you see my setup, I had a nice show for you. Technical glitches do these things to us, but look at this one. So where is this breakaway civilization, folks? It's right over our heads. But we don't look up, or not all of us look up. I know Jeff Krause of MUFON looks up. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. So there it is. This is your neighbor. This is the company we keep here in San Francisco. Let's see what else I can finish up with. If I have one more picture, let me just finish. But maybe we'll leave it at that, and if there's another time when we can get this fixed, I will try to do the presentation again. Okay?
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Robert. All right, thanks, Robert.